Please welcome Chhoangalia and Barney Weston.
Hello, hello. How are we doing? Good. I mean, is everyone in for the Hokey Pokey prize? Because that's the big one. And was loving the team names. Very animal themed. I don't know if that was like some direction that you got, but very interesting. Barney, how are you?
I'm very well. Thanks everyone for coming, and thanks for being so loud. I definitely need it. I was in, where was I? Dusseldorf last night for the England game. So yeah, really pleased to be here now, and yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah.
How was the game?
Well, it was great. Who watched the England game last night? Yeah. Yeah. What did you guys think? I thought it was. I mean, when we equalised, that was one of the best celebrations I've ever seen in person. I was at the Women's World Cup last year. When we equalised in that semi-final against Australia, that was really good. But last night, that equaliser by Saka, I've never seen anything like it in a ground. That was incredible. I mean, what a game! And for us to actually win the penalty shootout, I was at the Euro 2020 final. So for us to win this time and be there in person was really good. And so yeah, let's go. I think we can win it. There's a lot of negativity in England right now.
Oh wow, you think it's coming home?
But I think it is coming home. I really do. I think that.
You heard it here first.
Listen, hang about, wait a sec, okay? When we went one down, and then you've got Palmer, Bellingham, Foden, and Kane up front like that was a different ball game, wasn't it? Did you guys see the change in energy? So I think.
Seen some nods. Not a lot though. Let's be
guys,
honest.
just because you're out of the tournament, okay, you don't need to be bitter, okay? Sorry.
You also went to Glastonbury last week and saw Dua Lipa. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the only correct answer, how good was Dua Lipa?
Yes, Dua Lipa was very good.
Yes?
10. I mean, Coldplay, yeah, so I was speaking at Glastonbury as well, just to make this a little work related and not just to boast about what a great summer I'm having.
Little brag.
But yeah, it was a good time. It was a good time.
Sweet. So we are here to talk about climate change in football. And before we sort of get into your organisation and what you do, I think sometimes the issue people have with climate change is it's quite a difficult thing to resonate with. It seems like a faraway consequence of things that we're doing. To sort of bring it home, how will the average football fan feel the impact of climate change in the game that they love?
Yeah, well, I think, so I helped to start this organisation, Football for Future, about 3 to 4 years ago, and it focuses on the relationship between football and climate change. In England, there's another organisation called Kick It Out, which is about the relationship between football and racism. And really, all we did, one of the first things that happened when we kicked off was there was a report, not by us, but by someone we work very closely with, called the Playing Against the Clock report, and it said it took the headline stat of the report was that 1/4 of professional men's clubs in England could be flooded by 2050 due to sea level rise. Okay, so just let that sink in. It's professional men's teams in England, so it was clubs like Chelsea or Fulham or I think it was Brighton on the south coast or Southampton. The sea level rise was going to affect them. Now, and so that's. If you think about how climate change affects the game, it's either sea level rise or it's pitches getting dried out. It's probably going to be quite a hot day today. I mean, we're playing on AstroTurf, right? But I mean, how many games do you have cancelled because they're on grass pitches? It dries out. You can't play. It's too hot. I mean, you've got to take heat breaks, even at the professional level of the game as well. So those are different examples. But the reason I just said that about this report at the start is. Climate change is often seen as, polar bears or graphs or scientists and things like that. And actually that report, all it did was it took traditional flooding models that have probably been around since the 90s, the 70s, and just applied it to the football grounds. It's a comms exercise, right? So everything that you think of about climate change, you think about, fashion, or you think about, I don't know, drought or sea level rise. All we did was just condense it down into a cultural specific, and that specific being football. It's a comms exercise. But of course, there are also very real impacts on the game that climate scientists have been talking about for a long time. We just kind of made it relatable to football.
And was the report the catalyst in you co-founding Football for Futures, or was it something in the works already?
No, that was when that Our founder, a guy called Elliot, had the idea initially it was just dating on it for about a year, and then we met, and the report came out, and honestly, I was just a football fan. I think it was just after the Euro 20 final, maybe that shortly after that final had been shortly after I met Elliot, and we had like a good brand and a website. And then Elliot had some initial calls with people at Nike and a Premier League club, and those ended up being our first projects. So I say that as well to say that we were just talking about. I think in England as well, football can be quite amenable and open to new creatives coming into this space, and that's what we did. We had a new idea about football and climate, and yeah, our first projects were with Nike and a Premier League club, and things just went whoosh from there, and it all started as volunteers, and now we've got about 3 to 4 full-time staff. So yeah, it's good to just shows that football can be, it's got a bit of power behind it sometimes.
Yeah, and I suppose we've seen, so the Euros that we've had has been kind of heralded as a really great step in sustainability and a tournament that's really cared about climate change. Can you talk about a few steps that have been taken in the Euros to sort of make it a sustainable tournament?
Yeah, well, UEFA are billing this as the most environmentally sustainable tournament they've ever organised. And now when you think about environmental sustainability at mega events, it's quite a hard thing really to get right. Think about it, okay, the Olympics or the Euros or the World Cup, how do we get a group of people internationally coming together, huge amounts of people, millions of people, how can that happen in an environmentally sustainable way? And there are some people who say, well, it's not possible, full stop. And I mean, that's some of the real big conversation about major events. But UEFA, so there's basic steps that have started to happen over the last few years across loads of different major events, but the organisers don't make a big deal out of them. It's things like, energy usage, where's that coming from, packaging, recycling, just having recycling bins at major events. But what's really significant about this Euros is it's mostly around travel. So 70% of football's carbon footprint comes from fan travel. So that's people like me coming to the game. I took the train everywhere, so that's why I'm a bit knackered. 3 a.m. from where did I come from? Dortmund. Yeah, that's right. Thanks for that. Anyway, so this has been a significant tournament because, one, UEFA have made a lot of discounts on public transport for fans. So if you've got a match ticket, you've got a 36-hour free pass within the region to get to and from the game. So if you live locally, it's great. I came from England. They've put a discount on an Interrail pass for me. They've also done things like organise the group games, were all organised quite locally. So the idea was to get the teams to, take the bus to and from. Not many of them, or the train. Not many of them have done that, but some of them have. And then the final thing that is really significant is, now, what happens when you're approaching environmental sustainability as an organiser of an event? What you'll do is you'll look at your carbon footprint. That's the main thing. That's your impact on the planet, the climate, etc., as an example. So it's all about getting that down. It's all about getting, if a fan takes the train instead of a car, that will get the carbon footprint down. If you can, get rid of your waste in a different way so it doesn't go to landfill, if you can reuse, if you can have reusable cups, these are, not this, but they're at all of the stadiums, these can get your emissions down. But at the end of the day, there are things that you can't avoid. This is the problem with major events, right? They're always going to produce emissions. So what a lot of organisations do is they then start to offset, and offsetting is really murky. It's you basically buy something you'll say, okay, 1 ton of carbon, you put a monetary value to it, and that's a hard thing to do, right? How can you do that? But UEFA have then started to instead of actually buy. Oh God, sorry, this is all quite. I'll try not to get too complicated. But basically, you can buy a credit that is worth a ton of carbon, and then that will go towards a rainforest project in Brazil, okay? But these things are really hard to verify. Sometimes if you're planting trees, it will take 20 years for the tree to grow. It might not grow, things like the project might not last, things like that. So one thing that UEFA have done is they're not fully using carbon credits, and they've instead put a price to their carbon, about 21 euros or something. The US government have a value of about 50 euros. So about half the value of, what I would expect. And they put then that money into a fund that has then funded sustainable initiatives for German clubs. So I don't know if Andy's applied for this, but German clubs around the country then have applied for this fund, and UEFA have distributed money that way. So they're not directly claiming to kind of offset their footprint or anything like that, but they are saying we're going to make a financial commitment around this, and then we're going to put the money back into our local area. So things like that, I think, are quite significant. And UEFA have also said about how they feel. One guy, their main guy, their director of sustainability, said at a talk I was at, he was like, well, offsetting is a bit, isn't it? And that's really good, because you'll see offsettings everywhere about environmental sustainability, and to me, it's not enough.
Why is offsetting murky? Why is there a lot of controversy around offsetting?
Gosh, okay, this is quite subject specific, but effectively, if you purchase,
sorry, can you maybe explain what offsetting is?
oh, okay, right. So I tried earlier. This is okay. I'll try and make this simple, right? So I said you've got a carbon footprint, yeah. Like the event might produce 100 million tons of carbon, and you do whatever you can to get rid of those emissions. But you're still left with these emissions. They're called unavoidable emissions. I'm not a huge expert on this either. But what happens then is you'll put a price to each ton of that carbon. You'll say it's $21 US dollars for that, and then you'll pay off $21 times whatever number I said, 100,000 tons of carbon. And this then goes to different projects around the world, and they're very diverse. It could be things like you're planting trees again in the Amazon, or it could be you're funding, there's a lot in Africa around buying like stoves. I'm really not an expert on this, but it's these projects, they're not often kind of verified, and the companies that sell these carbon credits can be quite murky at times in terms of the verification of these projects. It's quite like a dense thing. I don't want to. I've come from Dortmund, so I'm done. You guys are probably tired. But yeah, if you're interested, then I'd recommend looking more into it.
I mean, because we see offsetting everywhere, right? You buy a flight and it's like offset, and you feel like you're doing a great thing, but I think it's been packaged as something that may not be as helpful as we think.
Well, the thing, just to say on that, it's like, well, should we be getting the flight in the first place? When we really talk about climate, if we're really going to engage in this topic, it's all very well and good on the surface, kind of saying things like your own individual behaviour change, but there are much bigger questions here. Should we hold major events? How can they change? The things like the Euros. In 2020, that was a pan-European tournament. Should we have something like that? About to talk about the World Cup, but in 2030, it's due to be a tournament across 3 continents. That seems obvious, right? But climate, when you really dive into it, there's so many other issues that we really still have to get to grips with before we can really make a lot of progress, real progress.
If it was up to you, would you have had this Euro competition?
Oh, well, this is for me, yes, because I'm a football fan and I love football and I love the Euros, and I think it's important that we have these international events like this. I think I was in Qatar in 2020, and that was really good because it was a much smaller area, and I got to meet so many people from around the world. You've just seen the Argentinians off to a game and the Saudis off to a game, whereas here I only really have seen the English opponents. So I think in terms of like bringing people together from around the world, that's really good, and sport. It really is the example of how this can happen. Would we have this event without the Euros? There's lots of things that activate around it, but yeah, it's major events are a tricky. They have an impact, and what's really important then is having a legacy. And this is only really a recent topic for lots of organisers. How can we make a good legacy, a positive legacy of these events?
And I mean, you mentioned the World Cup. So the Women's World Cup in 2023 was launched. What was coined the football's biggest climate campaign, and it was led by Denmark's Sophia Pedersen. You were involved in that initiative. Before we talk about it, how did that initiative come about? Did she have the idea and approach you, or was it like a big sort of communal thing?
So just top level, what this was we supported this Danish player, Sophie. We supported her to lead a campaign of around 50, 60 players to compensate their emissions from their flights. This is a perfect example of what I'm talking about in terms of how difficult this situation is, right? So that was the top level of this campaign, that we supported players to donate we times their carbon tonnage of their flights to and from Australia, from Europe, so quite a large amount. Sometimes it would be, I think the average donation was like a few £1,000, you know, so in the women's game as well, that's kind of significant. Yeah, then they kind of were then compensating their flights. But we didn't put the money into carbon credits. It's not worth going. It's just too complex for this time. But yeah, so Sophie had this, we supported her. We worked together with her on the idea. It came through, we have a good partnership with Common Goal, which is a network of professional athletes who donate 1% of their salaries to Football for Good organisations like us and others. And we kind of got some of these athletes together and started doing some climate education for them. And Sophie was one of these athletes. She was keen to do more. She was worried about her footprint, the emissions from her flight to and from Australia. She was feeling a bit guilty about it. So we came up with an idea out of that and then started telling the other players in our community. Jesse Fleming, who is a Canadian player, was at Chelsea at the time, has now completed a record North American move to Portland Thorns. And then Isabel Bernardi, who's an Italian player, they kind of fronted it, and then they kind of went out and spread the word about it, and about 50, 60 players got involved in the end. So, yeah, it just happened from there. And it shows that players can be conscious of their flights, and that's definitely something that's happening in the professional game.
Have we seen anything similar in terms of player movements for the Euros in the men's game?
Not really. I mean, I think that I was just talking with some colleagues the other day about if there's been any quotes from players during this tournament. No, not really, but it has been good to see a lot of the French players kind of talking about the election over there and encouraging against far-right votes. Regardless of your political opinions, it's good to see players taking part in kind of that in a conversation. But no, generally not. But there are fantastic people outside of the Euros and who are starting to ring that bell. In the UK, there's a player called David Wheeler. I think he's a League One or League Two player. So what's that? A step 3 or step 4 player. But he's gone in the UK. Well, actually, all countries who play professional football will have trade unions for their players. And he went to his trade union in the UK and said, what are you doing on sustainability? And he started to engage them. And they're even now talking about things like, because of course, as a trade union, they have a pension fund as well.
Right.
And he's even trying to engage with them on changing the bank that runs that pension fund. Because of course, banks have quite a big, role in terms of the climate crisis as well, in terms of who they loan money to, etc., and things like that.
Okay, and I suppose coming back to the Euros, we've seen a lot of great initiatives that have been taken, but then they still are sponsored by Qatar Airways, which is considered a big polluter, and fossil-free football, super against that. Does that negate some of the good work that's being done when you have a sponsor that is maybe causing some of those issues in the first place?
Well, again, this is it, isn't it? When you really dive into the topic, you got to talk about sponsors, you got to talk about flights, you got to talk about mega events. There are some really big questions here that we have to gauge with. It's all very well and good saying, and UEFA have done great things with the climate fund and with what they're doing to encourage public transport for fans and for players as well. But sponsorship is a huge issue. Football has, within the 4 years that we've been running, responded exceptionally well to this issue. I really do believe it has been, for a long time, a matter of raising awareness, educating people that there is a link between football and climate change. 4 years ago when we started, there were no sustainability managers in the Premier League, there were no sustainability strategies, but now, a majority of clubs have got sustainability strategies and sustainability managers. And the Premier League has also introduced criteria for their clubs that they have to adhere to become more environmentally sustainable. Same here in actually the Bundesliga as well, in German football, that's as of this season. When I do think that where we're going to struggle, or where there needs to be more other perhaps quite more radical voices pushing, is on the commercial side. At the end of the game, football is a commercial business, okay? It's not about kind of social good fully. I think club owners kind of generally would like to see a profit, and it's very hard to do that in the game. And sponsorship is a real key way of unlocking that money. So that's why you do see kind of questionable sponsors in the game. And I think the only way that we can really stop it is by having governing bodies really step up and having rules and regulations introduced. I think some clubs will kind of do the right thing and say, okay, well, I need to guard against this. But at the end of the day, that's a really big commercial decision. And so, yeah, it's no surprise then that we've got people like Qatar Airways sponsoring the Euros.
How has the reception been from players and teams that you've been talking to about sort of climate impacts and climate change?
Oh, really good. Like I said, clubs have started to develop strategies. They're recruiting sustainability managers. Players are really generally quite on board with it. If you can reach them, and I do, part of me genuinely does believe that if I could get in a room with Richard Masters, who's the CEO of the Premier League, and give him an education workshop, I think there would be more radical change at the Premier League. Remember, these organisations have got so many different competing priorities, right? And I then, for us, when we started it, a lot of my background is in kind of environmental activism, okay? And Football for Future, I get how that works, and I think it's important that exists, that protest side. But we kind of felt there needs to be something here that can really work positively with the football industry to create that change. And and you can see it in the change that's happened over time. But yeah, I think what we need to it's about raising awareness. Our mission, and I love our mission statement, is to build a more environmentally sustainable culture in football, and that means decision making. That means approaching it, and it's just about raising awareness. I mean, who was aware of this relationship today? I just go. The last 4 years, I've just been banging the drum, going around telling people. I can't, in my personal life, I can't say I work in football and climate because then I'm doing my pitch. But awareness of this topic is really low.
Yep.
People understand climate, but how it interacts then with football specifically. And okay, maybe you're not football fans as well, and this is why I said at the start, about how I had this. I helped to contribute to this idea early on. Let's do this in literature. Let's do this in, it's already happening in music. Let's take this climate issue and translate it into things that people can really relate to. And that's how we can, I think that's how we can make significant change.
So you said the awareness in football is quite low. And are those the ways you think you will increase awareness, or is there a different route that needs to be taken for football fans to increase awareness about climate change?
Well, I think everyone talks about I don't know if people are aware of Marcus Rashford here, and he had this big campaign in England in 2020 around free school meals and took on the government. Marcus was really positioned as the figurehead behind that, and that would have been right, but he would have had a big team of people around him, his agent, probably a PR agency. He was working with a charity who would have had policy experts and the government connections to make it happen. But everyone talks, okay, when's the next Marcus Rashford going to happen? So campaigns like that can really push the forefront, and that's what we tried to do with the Women's World Cup campaign a little bit. But, I think for it to really be a success, it has to be around things like domestic flights, it has to be around sponsorship, it has to be stuff that's got a real bit of meat to it from a news perspective, and that can kind of grab headlines, and it has to have a really big player. And I don't think we're quite there yet. There are Premier League players I know of who are interested in this topic. Kai Havertz did a kind of campaign for the Red Cross after his local region was flooded in Germany a few years ago after those bad floods. And he's also got a donkey sanctuary. So there's obviously something there.
He loves donkeys.
But you've got to reach Kai Havertz, and he's just been playing for Germany, and he's got a career with Arsenal going, and he's got competing priorities. So it's just about, I think, as we can create more of those, and it will happen in the next couple of years. But yeah, I think that's kind of that will be a good way to do it, alongside positive engagement with clubs. But there does need to be a little bit of, come on, let's rip things up a little bit.
Yeah. Do you have like an ideal footballer for like the head of your campaign?
Oh, it's not. It depends on your audience, right? Yeah. This is what I mean about Football for Future being a comms exercise. Who's your audience? Football fans. Let's nail into them, and we really nail into English football culture, Premier League football culture. So it really depends on what you're going for, and what you want the result to be. If it was a German government-focused campaign, I don't know, who's your favourite German player? If it was an English campaign, I'd love to work with Harry Kane.
Okay, Harry Kane. Got a name.
He invests in sustainable headphones. He's actually little products he's been investing in. So maybe he's got an interest. But again, I've got to reach Harry Kane somehow. So
I mean, we all saw the picture of Harry Kane in lederhosens, right? I think that would be That'd be a great poster.
Depends on your audience, I guess.
You've spoken about a lot about what you're doing and sort of the steps that have been taken by different tournaments and how well the work that you've been doing has been received. Are you feeling quite hopeful for the future of football?
Yes, I think so. I think change will keep happening. Clubs, most clubs in the Premier League now have sustainability strategies. The others will catch up eventually. They'll have to, and that's just, at that point they'll be seen as not being in line with industry standard. That's what environmental sustainability is becoming for business everywhere. So now where the sector is going is it's things like, how can we get clubs to engage in nature? How can we get training grounds to be kind of hubs of nature? Can we encourage rewilding practices there and engaging on that? But I do feel that it's now, for the big change to happen, there has to be significant campaigns around domestic flights, commercial sponsorship, and there are organisations out there who are doing that. Like they're called Fossil Free Football. There's a group called Badvertising. There's the Game Changer Pledge, which focuses around commercial sponsorship. So those guys need more help, and I think that will come. It's just common sense. I believe in the wheel of time. I believe in progress. I think that things catch up. It's just a matter of raising awareness and making it happen. I'm generally an optimist in that sense.
Nice. And you've spoken about sort of like big campaigns and sort of supporting them. As individuals, there's a lot of players here and a lot of fans. What's our sort of responsibility in this? Is it following the campaigns that you're doing, Fossil Free Football are doing, or are there other steps that we should be taking?
Well, I think it's tough, this. So there are lots of organisations out there who have started to gamify kind of individual climate action around football. So there's an organisation we work really closely with called Pledge Ball, an English charity, and what they do is they get you. If I'm a fan of Tottenham Hotspur, I'll go onto Pledge Ball's website and I'll make a pledge that I'm going to take public transport to Tottenham Hotspur all season, and that will earn points for my club, and it's a league table, and I'll win points, I'll win prizes and things like that. I think that's great, but I also think that we've got to be wary of that. It's not on individuals, and my own footprint is nothing compared to a club that isn't even on a renewable energy tariff yet. And that's really as simple as a phone call sometimes. So I at Football for Future, we really try and focus on that systemic change. And I think it's about raising awareness. If you're interested in this topic, you can check out Football for Future. But also, I would encourage you to really think as individuals on this, And that's why I say, 4 years ago, I was just a football fan, and then kind of someone else told me about this idea. I recognised it was something good. I got involved, and things went from there. We're our generation, society now is quite progressive and open-minded. People kind of more politically engaged. I mean, look at this event, and I think Germany is more like that, I think, than England. I used to live in Leipzig for a couple of years, so I think just engage in that and really be ambitious and just challenge yourself creatively. See what happens, because I really do believe in the wheel of time, and I believe that this society is something that you can take by the horns and change. I think that it is something that can be done. So that's what I really try to get across. That's my worldview, and that's what I try and get across with people generally. That we really can do it. And football is open to this change. If you are creative and you've got a good idea, in England at least, we were talking about this before, but in England at least, people will be open to it and they'll hear you out, because people who work in football are progressive too. They're like us. They're our age, young people. They want to see change in the game. It's only really when you get to high levels of people who've been working in the game for a long time and who handle commercial interests that, there's more of people I struggle to reach right now. But yeah, I think that would be my main thing to say, I think,
Nice.
really.
I want to end on asking you why you love football.
Oh gosh, well, I mean, I'm a season ticket at Tottenham Hotspur.
Oh no.
But
Didn't know that before we started.
But if you put the game on at home on a TV, I'd fall asleep. I guarantee it. Okay, I love England more than I love Tottenham, and for me, I just love it's the live event of it, and it's the community, and I think it kind of relates to what I said earlier about people can anyone. I think people can we can all engage in our society. And when you're in a big crowd of people and they're engaging, that's what's happening, isn't it? It's public engagement. 2012 Olympics in London was a really big moment for me. I was at the closing ceremony. You're in a stadium with 80,000 people, and I just really felt like part of something, And we're all citizens, and we can really do. For me, it's about citizenship, And I think to be a citizen in England means, if you're going to really engage, I think it means being a football fan. And
Oh, wow.
I think so.
I didn't think that's where you were going.
This is maybe quite deep. I don't know. Maybe I've got to do more thinking on this.
We have just had an election.
But I just think that's why I love football, because it's people coming together, and it really is the beautiful game. And I just think the potential of it. Look at what happened when the European Super League protests were happening.
Yep.
I think that you've got people who've probably a lot of people who aren't so politically engaged, coming down and really getting involved. And I just think that that's something quite special, and I think there's power in that.
Perfect.
And that's what we've tried to do with football and climate, take a topic like that and bring it to a new audience. And
Nice.
that's why I love football and culture more broadly as well.
That's lovely. It's that collective action.
Yeah,
Great.
that's this.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to seeing Harry Kane in some lederhosen for your next campaign. But yeah, give it a round of applause for Barney, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, Husna.
Thank you. One more time, Husna and Barney Weston.